Hey guys, this is Elliot tuning in again from The Bachelor and the Dad. I wanted to make one more video. Kind of feel like the life coming back into my body with this idea. Um, so it's not a new idea. It's not like it's just came about, but it's just a different form. Um, I want to mention the Tibetan practice of Chud, which is basically a practice developed by this uh, yogini from a long time ago. I don't want to quote the century because I'm not exactly sure. I can look that up. Perhaps I will as I'm speaking. But her name is Machi Globdrin, and she's a Tibetan yogini. And along with the practice of Chud, which is a spiritual practice, a psychological practice, um, a metaphysical practice, a ritual practice of offering the body um, to the forces that basically what the practice is it's transforming your body, which is something that in the ancient days and perhaps even today we could think of as something we cherish a lot. I mean, we go get six pack abs, we work on our tan, we get Botox and we get liposuction and we do all these different things to manipulate our bodies so that it looks attractive and it appears nice. And we often identify our sense of self with the body. So the idea here is that we take this thing that we cherish very much and that we lavish with all sorts of care, and we actually, rather than fighting off the things in our life that we don't like, we offer our body, like symbolically. It's not like we don't actually offer it, but in this practice of Chud, we melt the body and boil the body into a blissful nectar, which it actually already is, but in any case, we symbolically melt it, and and we actually melt the tensions in our body to release that bliss, and we offer that bliss to the things in life that we've been avoiding and trying to push away. So that's kind of the general idea. But I want to talk to you guys about this concept of having conversations with people that you've been avoiding. The reason I want to talk about that is because this is something that I have noticed happens, especially with people that you care for and that you love in your life that have been around for a very long time. There are things that can build up. There are basically inhibitions that can build up. When we've spent a lot of time with someone, unless our relationship is very unique, what can happen is that there's these different the spiritual teacher Don Miguel Ruiz talked about them as like agreements. There are agreements we make between ourselves and reality, and there's also agreements we make in a more specific way with people in our life, loved ones, people we care about very deeply and very greatly. And there's an intelligence to the agreements we make often. Often they are to avoid pain and to um, be in a happier state. So those type of agreements are great. But also what can happen is that often the reason that we want to avoid pain in a relationship and we make these certain agreements is because the initial event is something we're still holding on to. There's something traumatic that happened between us and a person in our life. Say, for instance, a family member, like our mother or our father, are ones that this often happens with. Or it could be with like a really good friend that you've known a really long time. And what ends up happening is that there was one event that happened at one specific period of time. Um, I'm fine with sharing with you guys one with me, just so it's a little more specific and down to earth, less esoteric. I went away to boarding school when I was 12 years old, 13 years old, and it was due to some calamity in my family, but also due to an opportunity given to me and my family by another group of our family, my aunt and uncle. They offered to help pay for my tuition at a nice boarding school with my cousins. So it wasn't just because I was a bad kid. Just so you know, I'm not a wild child, kind of. Anyways, but when I was 12 or 13, that I went away to boarding school, and what I became aware of, I, I think that I've become more aware of it very strongly in the last couple of years because basically I went to boarding school in Canada when I was 12 or 13, and I ended up living up there for about 16 years. And I just returned back to California where both my parents live, maybe 2.5 years ago now. So I haven't spent a lot of time with my parents physically, and one of the things I wasn't aware of, but I've become aware of since being back here, is I first of all had this concept that like when I move back, I'm going to reestablish this relationship, this in-person relationship, in a more in-depth way with my parents, um, like it was, I guess, when I was 12 or 13, but now I'm 33. So, anyways, what's come to the forefront, come to the surface since I've been back is that there's a lot of trauma that both my parents have experienced in relationship or did experience in relationship to me moving away. And it seems that me returning is causing that trauma to surface in our relationship. And the reason you might see me bright eyed and bushy tailed is because um, I know that embracing your challenges can lead to a deepening into your life, and it can end up being very positive. And that's exactly what this concept of chud is about. It's offering. It's about embracing your challenges. So I want to. Chud is not something that I. It's something I have practiced, but I'm not formally practicing that. Although I do feel like I'm informally practicing chud all the time in my life. But I wanted to bring up another quote by this Tibetan saint, yogini, of I don't know what century. Her name's Machi Globdrin, and it's the five slogans of Machi Globdrin. And I want to connect this to the idea of opening up to conversations that you don't want to have because of an agreement you've made with someone. So here are the quotes by Machi Globdrin, the five slogans. Confess your hidden faults, approach what you find repulsive, help those you think you cannot help, anything you are attached to, give that, go to the places that scare you. So this is like really, the more I think about the way that I'm engaging with life recently, and it's sometimes we engage with life just intuitively. We take a job because it pops up on our radar on our LinkedIn profile, and someone mentioned it to us, and there's some series of circumstances that come together, and we take a job in the city, and we don't know why we took that job in the city, or there's moves we make in life that, while they have a certain amount of forethought, it's not like we know all of, speaking for myself, it's not like I always know all of my intentions going into something. I know I can line up my best intentions, I can line up my reasoning, my practical reasoning for doing something, but sometimes after you've been in a position for a while, things change and different. You realize, like in hindsight, that your intentions were of a certain nature. You understand them more. So similarly with people we've known a long time and we've built up these agreements, there's certain agreements that we made that are worth revisiting. And the reason I believe that they're worth revisiting is because they were made based on a traumatized thing that happened. Like, so for instance, when my parents, when I went away to school, what I've noticed for my parents, and I think that actually a lot of this is probably almost over for my parents, but I noticed that they have a lot of guilt about the things in their life that led to me going to boarding school. Like, so there was conflicts that they were having between each other, and they, I think, felt a certain level of guilt, and also they were probably angry and a lot of other emotions. But the fact that these conflicts between each other um, led to me going to boarding school and basically not, at the age of 12, not really having as tight of a relationship as I could have had with them. So this is something that I also have to grieve and I also have to come to terms with. And I think that I have been coming to terms with that. That was the past and that's what happened, and also that really has influenced the present with my parents and how we presently interact. And I think that there's trauma there for me. I know I can speak for myself, and I definitely sense, although I'm not a mind reader or whatever, I've picked up from things that my parents have said and about each other and about themselves, that they're not necessarily, that they're hard on themselves about how they raised me, that they're not always happy about everything that they did when they raised me, and that because of that, there's certain trauma, and because of that, there's certain agreements that we make with certain people about what kind of relationships we can have moving forward because this bad thing happened. It's almost really like, if you think about it, it's really similar to law. So it's like laws often are put in place because of a particular incident, or maybe a particular incident recurring several times. And that gives the reason for a new law to be put in place where you can't do such and such a thing. Right. You can't. What do they change? They changed like peeing. One that changed over the course of my life, I remember, is that with my dad, I don't need to get too into it, but basically like peeing in public, like, there's obviously lines of what that is, but now apparently if you pee in public in the wrong place, and someone catches you, it can be considered like a sex crime, like public indecency, which makes sense because people can pee in really public places and they are publicly exposing themselves. But I remember when I was younger, me and my dad would go backpacking, for instance, in the wilderness, and you can pee wherever you want within reason because it's all trees and rocks and it's kind of the natural latrine or whatever. So anyways, kind of going on a digression, but my point is that when things, when someone breaks the law, when someone, publicly exposes themselves enough, and we find that that's disturbing for society, we create a law to stop that. So what I'm talking about here is not revisiting things like that. I'm talking about things, that's just an analogy and kind of going on a digression, but I'm talking about there are things that happen in relationships, traumatic things that happen between us and another person, and there is a way of, even without having a conversation with someone, even without like in person, it can be over email, or even not having a conversation, not, writing, emailing, texting, meeting in person with someone that you have had these agreements. There's a way of opening yourself up to revisit and to heal areas that you have experienced trauma and you have unnecessarily constricted yourself in relation to another person. So, like I said, I went to boarding school. That time has passed, and I'm 33. I'm a grown up now, and it's really not necessary for me to hold on to any frustration I have about my parents. The things that the immaturities my parents had that led to them having the conflicts that they had and not being able to resolve it. In particular, conflicts not obviously an issue that happens. It's part of life, but them not being able to resolve it, and it boiling to the point of me having to go to boarding school. Of course, there are many positive things about boarding school, but but for me, I also lost a certain connection with my parents there. They felt they lost it with me, and this kind of pattern, this reified pattern, gets set up of resentments and frustration and blame, triangles of blame and all this sort of stuff. So, to this point of the slogans of Maciej Lobdrin, if we think about confessing our hidden faults, so like, for me, that would definitely be being judgmental. But it goes deeper than that. It's like holding on to a grudge, that's a much deeper one. Being judgmental is one thing. Actually, I'd argue that being judgmental is, you can do a bit of a language game. It's important to have discernment in life, and discernment, it's important to even make agreements, right? It's important to have boundaries at certain points of life for different reasons that we have. If someone hurts you and they want to hang out the next day and they did something really harmful for you, it's probably good to put up a boundary. But I just want to get across that you can revisit these things that harmed you, and you can, if there's been enough time and there's been enough reflection, that you can open back up these conversations, even within yourself, about things that you were upset by, and you can come to understand them in a new light. It's not to say that that certain things didn't happen to you. It's not to say that you may still feel that, you would do something different if you were in the position again. But we can open it up, and we can feel that emotion again. We can feel that those grudges we have against people, and we can liberate some of that energy so that we're not actually, because that's the funny thing about, so-called demons or so-called, demons, is that we spend so much time fighting them that what ends up happening is that they end up ruling us. And, I'm just speaking the truth from my own life. Like, I've spent a lot of time trying to, beat up demons, and that has a certain role. There's not to say that there isn't a role for protecting yourself or putting up boundaries. I think that that's absolutely essential, and we can get to that in another video. In a certain way, that's just as important as opening yourself up to heal. But let's get to that in another video. The main concept I wanted to share with you guys today is healing old wounds, and that this is possible, and it starts with having an honest conversation with yourself about what has been painful for you, and beginning to enter in a dialogue with that, opening it back up. And you can change the terms of the agreement once you do that. Once you acknowledge it, open it back up, you can take a look at the content, change the terms of the agreement. All right, guys, that's it. I hope this is helpful. I hope this content's fun and uplifting and helping you get through COVID-19. And we may be here for a while. Life may have really changed since the start of this COVID-19, and we may be in a new phase of life, and let's embrace it. Let's get into it. So leave it with that, guys. Much love. Take good care. Like, subscribe, comment. We'll see you next video. Okay, bye-bye.